And we are back. All right. So, now that we have a proper size for the tab page, we can try and see if we can get this configured a little better or placed a little better, I guess. There's a typo in there. Auto start, not auto server. Auto start server when launcher starts. Might want to put these into groups to make it look a little nicer, I guess. Yeah, let's see if we can do that. So if we add in a group box here for server path thingy, server path and jar, and then we'll move these in there like that, along with the select button, which we can align with that one. And then another one for the memory stuff. Memory settings. And actually this one should probably be configured like that one is. No, not that one. Sorry, this one. So here we set the minimum to 256 and the maximum to 8. Right there, 192 and the minimum 256. So the default value will be 256. All right. And then we'll leave this one down here. Okay. Let's see if we move this up here somewhere, like there, for example, and then yeah, let's put it, say, here, for example, and then see if we can get this lined up a little better. Let's see, that's 19, yeah, we'll put it here. And make sure that there's proper spacing here, like so. Then we can line this one up using the snap thingy, and we'll do, I guess we could use the, yeah, let's do that. Because why not? So let's put that here, and this one here somewhere. Let's see. Yeah, we'll put it here, and then that one is not going to be that big, so this should be fine. And yeah, all the tedious UI design stuff. See, this one needs to be there, and that was at 29, so let's put this one at 29 as well, and then get this one set up here. There we go. There, that's a little better. All right. So, the last bit of it is all of the schedule configuration stuff. And since we are completely rebuilding this, I'm kind of keen on getting the entire schedule editing stuff um, basically redesigned because I want to add in the options for enabling warning messages, including the entire customization of them. So that'll be part of the new scheduling configuration stuff that we'll be putting on here. Um, but I think I will wait adding that and then see about getting these the other two tabs coded up so they become usable. We'll need the two buttons down here for the cancel and accept. So we'll put those there. This would then be the accept button, or we'll just use OK. Okay, and then cancel. There we go. And then we will bind these two buttons to the defaults of the form. There we go. That way, when the form is visible and you hit escape, that will effectively cause the cancel button to be clicked. The same goes for hitting enter, in this case for the OK button. Um, so we can use those to control exactly what happens. All right. So let's see, what kind of setup do we need in terms of handling all of these different controls? Well, we definitely need to hook the select click event, select buttons click event. So let's grab that one. We don't really need to grab any of the other stuff here because that basically all comes down to the OK button. In terms of basically grabbing the information that's in here and the settings and whatnot and stuffing them in our configuration. So that pretty much does it for this tab over here. However, we do need to do things slightly differently. I actually want to get these lined up with, let's see, 27. Get those lined up with the other ones here, which means that one needs to go one down. And this one is at unknown location 72. So let's get that over there and see if we can put it back. There we go. Now they line up with the other ones. All right, again here, we don't really need to hook any events for most of these controls since we basically just need the settings at the instant where we are going to actually, actually save the contents. So for the most part, we don't really need to grab much here either. Let's see, I don't believe we need to grab any of them actually. But let's have a look here and see what kind of hooks we've done in here. Cancel button, OK button. The rest of it is just internal stuff that's populating them and getting the values. So no, we don't really need to grab anything. That should be fine. We do, however, need to hook the events for the OK button and the cancel button. So we'll grab those. Um, the select button belongs to the first tab, which is here. And these two buttons are for the entire dialog itself. So we'll do control events right here and then move them up here. That should be fine. And then the rest of this stuff, for the most part, we should be able to go grab the code from the original dialogues and migrate it over here. And in doing so, we should be able to fairly quickly repopulate everything in terms of functionality. There are a few things that we may need to do slightly differently, though, because we are now in a tabbed setup instead of a window-based setup. We will definitely need to handle loading of server properties, the server properties file differently, because that kind of depends on what's in the first tab. So when we go to select the server jar for this particular server instance, then that would be the trigger to go look for a server properties file. The same for the EULA file, which is this one. This one is we actually implemented a method in here that checks for it and generates it if it isn't in there already, I believe. Let's see, I honestly can't remember. It's been a while since we did this. Let's see. It might actually be in the other one. So it might be in this one, actually. Come to think of it. Yes, I do believe it's in here somewhere. Yep, check EULA.txt and check server properties file. So they are part of the original profile setup. So we kind of need to put those in there as well, which of course belongs to the first tab. All right, let's go grab the select button here. Might as well just make use of it since we already have the code. There we go. That takes care of the select button. And from here, if we end up getting an OK from the open file dialog, then this would be the perfect place to look for a server properties and potentially load it. On the other hand, that's also something that we can do whenever the tab itself is selected, as in when the user clicks settings, we can look for it, load it up, and then populate the form accordingly. When the OK button is clicked, we can go through the motion of doing all the checks for the EULA.txt and do the proper server properties configuration, writing and saving it to disk and so on. So we'll have to do things a little differently than we did before, but overall we should end up with pretty much the same kind of functionality. All right. Let's see, what else do we need? That one opened up the other one. That's the accept. Cancel. Yeah, cancel is pretty simple. We'll be doing exactly the same thing. And the rest of this stuff is, well, let's see. These two we will probably need to grab at some point. Other than that, oh right, this one is the one that creates a default setup with all the major default settings pre-configured the way that the server does manually, or does on its own. So that's probably something that we will need to do as well. This sets the two text boxes. That should be fine. Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, we'll probably need to hook the shown event as well. So let's go do that. There we go. This is just so we can properly update the UI with stored settings. All right. So let's see what kind. Oh, wrong one. What kind of setup did we have? Well, we did have a custom property for the actual server property, server profile. So this is something that we will need to have for the new config dialog as well. So we'll put that up here and basically just grab a copy of this because that's effectively all we need. Of course it doesn't know it because we haven't imported the namespace for it. And that's pretty much it. For the cancel, this dialog result equals cancel and bug out. To do implement checks to ensure that we can save all settings and then save if possible. There we go. So here we should see about let's see, this one would be the, yeah, we need to do set up the profile tab with contents from the server profile. And that's basically just adding in the server name, the path, the jar, setting up the memory, and the checkbox for whether it should auto start or not. All right. We did have something along those lines in the original here somewhere. Let's see, that one is the wrong one. Actually, did we do all that in the shown event? Yeah, we did. Okay. Well, that's fairly straightforward, though we'll probably just create a separate method for doing that setup stuff so we can um, yeah, so we can just call a method to repopulate the tab whenever it's shown in case we need to. At least for this particular tab, since the contents of the settings tab is determined by what's in the profile tab in terms of a path to the given server instance, we definitely need to have a method that can correctly populate the settings tab whenever it's activated. And then implement, let's see, we probably want to see about adding the tab dialog. Yeah, let's get that in there as well. Tab control 1 dot, let's see, if memory serves, the click event doesn't exactly expose which tab was selected, and let's see, tab index change, that would be the one occurs when the control tab index property value changes. So if we hook this event, we would have a fair indication of whichever tab goes active, regardless whether it's clicked with the mouse, done through keyboard, or if we decide to force one of them active through code. That should potentially trigger this particular event. Actually, hold on a second. Is this the tab stop? It probably is. Yeah, we would have to use this one instead, I think. Selected index property. Yeah, I think this one is most likely the tab stop index. So we probably need to use this one instead. Yeah, we'll use this one. That should be the right one. So we'll grab this one and put it up here. There we go. So this one should be the one that indicates which of the different tabs are active. Yeah, should be this one. All right. So if selected index becomes 1, selected index equals 0, profile tab. If it's 1, then it's the settings tab, and if it's 2, then it is the schedule tab. There we go. All right. So using this, we can figure out whether we need to refresh basically the entire settings tab based on whatever profile might have been preloaded or reloaded for that matter. However, since we kind of need to keep whatever settings might have been configured between each tab click, we will probably have to do some of this stuff during let's see, the shown event for a pre-configured profile. If the select button is clicked to select a different path for the the Minecraft server instance, then we need to basically clear whatever server properties settings were previously loaded, load up the new ones or generate default ones, and then refresh the settings tab accordingly. So there are a few different things that we need to be aware of in terms of handling all this stuff, because it depends on each other, so to speak. It's a little more involved getting things to work correctly without accidentally overriding intended configuration changes. So it's it's a little more involved doing doing all of this all in one dialog. It is usually a little easier keeping things separated, because stuff that depends on other stuff can quickly become pretty complex to handle, at least when you want it handled in a way where it doesn't basically hinder the user from doing what needs to be done. The whole idea is to have all of this be a nice assistance tool instead of something that just becomes more tedious working with. So we'll definitely need to do things the right way. Anyhow, let's see. Here we need to set up the profile tab, and that kind of depends on whatever is in this particular property. And while doing that, we also need to do the check to see if a server properties file exists. If we don't have a path because we're creating a new one, then we need to add in the updating for the server properties stuff here. So do checks for server properties and reload those settings for the settings tab. Okay. All right. So this is the initial showing of the dialog itself. So here we probably want to do some overall internal helper methods. We'll do a check configuration method and have this one run all the different checks that need to be done in terms of ensuring that we have available settings that we can populate the dialog with. And we also need to go fetch the methods for populating the combo boxes. So all of this stuff we probably need to copy over as well. For now though, we'll do a quick check on the actual settings here. So let's see if the profile, let's see, it's just called path. Yeah, if we got a path, then this is an existing profile. If we didn't, then we basically need to leave out any of the initial configuration and construct a default setup. Okay. So if this contains a path, then we can start populating the profile stuff. Let's see, this one equals the profile, whoops, dot name, server path, profile path. Actually, I do think we have those here already. Yeah, let's grab these ones. There we go. And that one is called something different. Auto start server. There we go. So that takes care of these. And then, of course, we also need to check to see if there's a server properties file. If not, reset it back to defaults and so on. That's the shown, so we'll set that. Since the profile tab will be the active tab when the window is shown, we should be able to set the focus on the server name. So we'll do that. Txt server name focus. There, that takes care of that. And then set up profile tab. Yeah, all right. If it's empty, then we'll basically leave all of the controls in their default setup as they are right here. This will then become the default settings for whatever new profile is being created. For the settings tab, we again have a number of default setups. So those we don't really need to mess with either, though we still need to populate, that was the wrong one, we need to populate the all of the combo box stuff. So we'll grab a copy of that from the original dialog and move it over here as part of the settings tab. And then put them in here. And of course it's gonna complain a lot because let's see, we changed the names of some of the controls, so we'll have to rename these accordingly. There we go. Do believe we called, no, didn't we? Let's see, that will be this one. Nope. This one needs to be cd difficulty. There we go. And that takes care of this one. In the old dialog, I prefixed it DD for drop down. Here I've put CB for combo box. Just a minor change, nothing major, but it's something that of course still needs to be set up correctly. There we go, get this one set up, and that one's missing, so we'll need to fix that one, which we should have in here somewhere, right there for example. Grab this one, put it up in our internal helper methods, and then put this one in another region method. There we go. So we can collapse them and get rid of them when we don't need to view them. Here's another name change, and finally right here Name change, all done. Okay. Now, as part of the original load up here, we had a method called populate dialog. In this case, we probably need to rename it so it'll get a name that matches the fact that we are updating a tab, not a dialog, but we definitely still need to populate the three combo boxes. So we'll grab these and put them in the load event of this form right here. Populate the three combo boxes. There we go. And this will then take care of making sure that the level type, game mode, and difficulty combo boxes are populated with the appropriate data for things like difficulty settings, for what kind of terrain settings we need to put in there, and so on and so forth. Let's see, game mode, level type, and let's see, I can't remember why we did this one. Oh, right, that's the one that puts the correct constant names in the settings file. God, my memory is just junk today. Alright, let's get some of this collapsed because we don't really need to look at the code as such. There we go. Collapse this one. All of this stuff is strictly for the purpose of keeping track of our combo box stuff as part of the settings tab. So the last bit we need is something that can correctly refresh or populate this particular tab whenever it is selected. Whatever data needs to go in here, of course, depends on what was either loaded or generated in terms of the server properties settings. So we'll need to do something about that particular part as well. This one. So if we have a path here, then we should probably also check for a server properties file and load it if it exists. Yeah, so if we do this, then oh, actually we will just rely on these two, because then we can place a call to this one, I guess, when the select button has been successfully used to specify a new path and server jar. So we can correctly update the rest of the dialog with whatever new settings might have been found or loaded. So we'll go through that. We also need to basically copy over the code that A generates the EULA file, and B generates the default server properties configuration file for a completely fresh server instance. And let's see where those are. I think they are here. Yep. Okay, so the check EULA, this one should basically only be um, um, it should only be called when the OK button is clicked, because that is the only instance where whatever configuration was chosen becomes valid as um, a collection of settings that should be saved along with this particular server instance or server profile. So this one we need to be pretty particular about in terms of when we choose to call it. We'll put it in here. Check EULA should be here. There we go. And of course here it'll complain that we don't know file, so we'll grab that. Job done. And the next one would of course be check server properties file. This one again checks whether a default one exists. If not, it generates a new one. However, for this particular setup, we can't exactly reuse this particular code. Instead, we kind of need to create a new method that will let us basically generate a fresh server properties list of stuff that contains all the defaults, so we can do them in memory instead of writing them to disk. The reason for that is so that we can correctly select a new path, revert back to default settings, and save whatever changes were made to the profile when the OK button is clicked, instead of having to rely on the server path being pre-configured for us, like the old setup did. So we'll need to do some different checking there. As part of the select button, of course, we need to check whether a server properties file exists. If it does, then load it. If not, then generate default settings. And for handling that, we have our inifile class that takes care of all those all the text parsing and stuff for us for the configuration file. So we'll add in a reference to that and then take it from there. Yeah. Check check server properties file, and this one we need to reconfigure to make use of the text box control here that indicates the path, and look through that folder to see if there is an instance of or if there's a server properties file in here, and if there is, then load it. Otherwise, clear the current config file object and repopulate it with the default settings, so we can get those things synchronized correctly. Alright, so inifile, we'll put it up here for the moment. Actually, let's see, what did we call it here? We actually did call it server properties. Alright. We also have a validate level name, generate default setups. Yeah, maybe. Interesting. So we actually do have one here that can pre-configure all that stuff for us, and then we'll simply use this one to handle it for us. So let's grab a copy of this, and this one needs to be private, and import the namespace for it. There we go. And this actually covers all three tabs, so we kind of need to leave it open to be accessible by all three, I guess. However, the generate default setup from here we can copy over. EFG, so that's down here somewhere, and this may end up at some point complaining about a lot of other missing parts. For this one we need to figure out whether we have a existing, let's see, yeah, alright, so let's see, this would be Minecraft path equals the server path text box. We shouldn't end up in a situation where we've got anything in there as such, blah blah, but just in case, if this one has something in it, then we'll see if, let's see, if there is a trailing backslash missing, then we'll add it. There we go, and then we'll see if file exists, Minecraft path plus the server properties. If it exists, then we'll load it, and if it doesn't, then we'll simply have it generate a new one. So here we'll generate default setup, which should take care of that particular thing, and here we basically just need to load it, I guess. So let's see, over here somewhere we should have a reference to how to load it. So yeah, we should probably use server path instead here. Let's do that. There we go. That's better. And then grab this one. The true here indicates that we are using virtual grouping to accommodate a server properties file instead of the actual ini file setups. So this now takes care of loading the configuration if it exists, or generating default settings for it if it doesn't exist. And this one we basically need to call from two different places. One of them would be during the shown event. The reason for that is because we need to load the server properties when the dialog is initially shown, or force default settings for the settings tab if no configuration file exists. Check configuration takes care of adding in the path to the server, so it should be fine calling it from here. The second place that we need to call it from is in the profile tab. In the select buttons, click event, which is right here. So we can correctly check to see if this selected path contains a server properties file. If it does, load it, otherwise clear the settings in memory and generate the default setups. which is exactly what this method does. So we should be fine. Okay. Right. These are now set up. So let's see if we can do something about populating the settings tab. Now we can do the settings tab populating as part of yeah, we probably want to do that. We already have the check server properties file stuff, so why don't we place a call to, actually this only checks it, so we should probably stick with what it should do and what it shouldn't do. In the settings tab, we need to add in a method that can populate the tab page correctly. So let's create one that populate settings tab. There we go. This one strictly deals with stuffing data into the different controls on the tab page for the server settings. So this will make use of all of these different properties right here. Server IP, port, online mode, blah, 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 all this stuff. This is all stuff that we need to access so we can correctly populate the form. And I do believe that we have a method right here that deals with exactly that setup. So this one will copy these over to our new config dialog and put them in here, and then we'll fix whatever changes have been made. So first of all, this one was renamed to bind to IP, so that takes care of that. Then this one is a method, worker method from here that we need to add in. So we'll do that. Let's port default, so that goes down here, like so. And check online mode. Didn't we call it that? No. I'll rename this so it makes more sense. There we go. Then we have the another helper method from here that we need to transfer over. I'll put that up here where it belongs. There we go. And yeah, this is a little bit tedious too, but it's part of the process, I guess. Get rid of that one quick. We need the string default from here, so we'll grab that, which goes up here. There we go. And this one was renamed to CB instead, and that one we need to transfer over from here. We probably need that one as well, so we might as well grab it while we're here. They need to be under the default settings, so right there, and collapse them. Collapse this one, and then this would be CB instead, and CB instead, and this one will be a little bit different. For the moment, we will simply just add it to the first one of them. We'll add in a to-do right here to keep ourselves informed what we need to fix. Add in some checks and splits if a new line indication exists. handle custom colored stuff as well. Reason for that is because we now have two text boxes to handle the two possible lines of message of the day information instead of just one. By setting up the two lines here, we can simply just look for the new line indicator, split it in two, and stuff the second part of it into the second text box, so we can keep those two lines separated, just to make it a little easier to basically configure each of the two lines when using this dialog for it. Alright, so far so good. This one now takes care of populating it. So in the two instances where we call the check server properties file, we also need to place a call to populate the settings tab. And the second one is of course part of the profile tab, because we have the select button in here. So we'll put it up there. And we'll do this. This is a button, which is the select server button. There we go. Then we can collapse this separately, so we can add in whatever extra code we need there. And we should be fine so far. Whether we actually need to be able to catch clicks of the tabs, not quite sure yet. We'll have to see how it works out. But we still have the option to do so, should we need to. Since we're basically handling all of the server properties stuff in memory instead of relying on a disk file, we shouldn't really need to do any kind of tab click checking, but we still have the option available to us. Okay, so for the OK button, we of course need to update basically the configuration file for our application, as well as the server properties file for the server instance. What we previously had in two separate dialogues, we now need to combine into a single one. So let's have a quick look at what it looks like in this one, which would be the accept button in here somewhere, right here. All right, so let's see, didn't I have a validate in here somewhere? I can't remember. No, I had that as part of this one because it that was for the level name. My bad. All right, so on the original base profile, the accept button here just checks that there's actually something put into the server name, the path, the jar, and that's basically enough for it to accept this as a potentially valid setup. So we should be fine in doing that as well. Since that's part of the OK button now, we still need to do the EULA check, and of course basically migrate most of this particular setup over to the new dialog. So for now we'll simply grab, actually we should probably do some validation checks before we go through the process of simply just saving everything that's in there. If something's missing or something is not acceptable, then the user needs to fix this before we actually start writing these changes to disk. We don't really want to save incorrect settings or by accident do partial saves. So we'll do some checking in there in each of the individual tabs. I guess so. In here we will put in a method to check to see if the contents are valid. So let's do that. Hi there, Ortonado. Good to see you again. At the moment, the only as such progress we've made is basically just a single window containing all of the configuration. It's divided into tabs at the moment. But basically contains exactly the same settings as the old dialogues did, except we've now collected it all in one. The third tab, schedule, is still missing the schedule setup, but that's because I wanted to partially rearrange it and partially add in some new settings for it so we can configure customized warning messages. The old scheduled dialog didn't have that option. So that's part of the new stuff that will go in here. This particular window is not active in the application just yet. It will become active. But at the moment I'm simply migrating the code from this dialog and this dialog over to this new dialog. So it's just a bit of control and code migration, UI revamping, I guess. Some of it is just tedious work, but it's all part of the process, so it has to be done. And definitely let's get a cup of coffee. Nice. All right, so what was I doing? I was adding in, yeah, we need some validation stuff. Let's see. Tab, profile, valid. We do need to check before we start saving settings to disk. We do need to check that whatever settings were chosen are valid. So that's what this will do for us. As part of the validation for the profile, we need to check that there's a server name, a path, and a jar, and that those files potentially exist, and so on and so forth. So that's basically part of this setup. Now, in the old dialog, it did not check that the path was valid. It did not check that the server jar exists. So that's something that we will add in as part of the new validation setup. So first of all, we'll see if a proper name was specified, which is basically the same thing as before. So we'll simply just do a check on the server name and make sure that it has a length greater than 0. If it does, then we're fine. Otherwise, we'll pop a message and basically bug out with a false. So let's grab the, let's see, this one. You have not provided a name for this server profile. Please specify a name and try again. So we'll grab that and move it over here. Poof. And then we shall return false. Actually, yeah, we'll do it there. That should be fine. Okay, so if we did get a name, then we can perform the next check, which is to try and work out whether, actually we'll move this down here instead. There we go. We'll need to work out whether a path, a valid path was specified. In the old setup, we simply only checked that there was something in the text box. In this new build, we'll check that a path or some text was in there, and then we'll see if it's a valid path that exists. If it is, then we'll accept that as okay. Otherwise, we'll bug out and tell the user you derped up. So we'll grab a quick string here, server path, trim that one, and then see if this one is greater than 0. And if it is, then we can do a quick check to see if it exists as well. Server path. So if something was specified and it exists, then we're okay. Otherwise, we can simply just do a check to on the server path to figure out which message we need to tell the user. So if that one's greater than 0, then the directory didn't exist, and thereby that part of the configuration is invalid. Or we can tell the user that you forgot to select a jar, server jar, and a yeah, basically tell the user that you haven't selected a valid server. So and here we'll select, put the focus on this one. We could potentially, and we actually should, set the tab controls, the selected index to selected index. We should force that to 0, which will force the profile tab to become active. We should do that before we focus anything in this tab, so we'll do that because we don't know which tab potentially is active at this point. So we'll do that. Here we basically select this, so this doesn't really matter. We'll cut that away and just show the same message. And since we get to this point, we'll end up returning false for the validation, so that should be fine. Okay. Next part, actually, yeah, why don't we just do, yeah, we'll do the check on the path and the jar selection. If either one of those is empty, then we'll, hey, you need to select this, and if it contains something, then we'll do the checks and dump a different message that basically tells the user that the path and or jar that was selected is incorrect. Please check, verify, all that stuff, all the good stuffs. So we'll do this. If both of these are greater than 0, then we'll do the proper checks. If not, then dump the message. Need to select the right one. If a directory exists, server path, actually, why don't we just file exists? Yeah, let's do a quick check here. If this one doesn't contain a trailing backslash, then we'll add it to it, just because. There we go. And then we'll file exists this, and yes, I know that we can use the path combine, which basically does the same thing. Server jar. So if this one exists, then we've correctly validated, and we can return true. And if it doesn't exist, then either the path is incorrect or the jar doesn't exist. And we can then tell the user that whatever server jar and path you've specified is incorrect or missing. You need to check this and try again. So let's throw a message stating something along those lines. So the Minecraft server jar that you have specified is either missing, Please verify the path and name of the jar and try again. There we go. Okay, and fair enough. Missing Minecraft server jar. And then we'll need a OK button, and we'll put the exclamation there. And then basically we'll do exactly the same thing as here. And since this all bubbles out to this point, we will get a false from the tab validator if anything along the lines or along the checks goes wrong. So this should be fine. Let's go find the OK button. So if the tab profile is valid, then we can continue and do the checks for the next one. Of course, here when we add in the checks on the settings tab, we can simply just add it, do an AND here to make sure that both are validated correctly, and then only then do the actual saving of the configuration stuff. Now on this one, we again need to go and check what the accept button here says, so we can do the correct validations of everything. This one basically only generates a valid level name, and if it ends up with a length greater than 0, then it accepts that as a valid configuration for it, and then generates stores all of the settings into the server properties file, writes it to disk, and then we're done. So we basically need to just do about the same thing. So let's go grab the validate level name. It's got to be in here somewhere, right there, for example. And then we'll add that to our internal helper methods up here so we can make use of it. There we go. And then we need to create one for the settings tab, pretty much identical to this one. So we'll put that down here. Method tab settings valid. There we go. And then we'll do a similar check here. This, of course, needs to also return a Boolean value. There we go. So we'll do a quick level name equals, actually, why don't we just grab it from down here? It's in here somewhere. There we go. Grab this one. That's basically it. We can grab this one. And that then determines that we have a valid setup. The rest of it should be fairly straightforward. Basically, you don't have to specify an MOTD. You don't exactly have to specify all the other properties because the server will automatically pick defaults if parts of the configuration is incorrect or missing. So the only thing that has to be correctly validated is the level name, because that becomes a folder name. So it's vitally important that the level name is correct. Okay, so now we can add this one in, tab settings valid. So if both of these are valid, then we potentially have valid configuration data that we can write to disk. So let's see about doing that. We still need to grab some stuff from here. So we'll go back to the accept button of the first one, and what we need to do is we need to basically grab this. That one we can handle afterwards, but this is important for the profile tab. So handle saving the profile tab, which would be this. Basically, it's grabbing whatever previous profile was added to or set as the property for the dialog, and then updating it with all the relevant information. So auto start server, there we go. Do a check to see if the EULA file exists. If it doesn't, it will be created and pre-configured to containing the value true, which to the server, Minecraft server, indicates that the end user license agreement has been accepted, thus allowing the server to boot up. Every time you set up a fresh Minecraft server, it requires this file to exist before it will allow full startup of the game server itself. When you've done this 100 times, it becomes tedious that you have to start up the server, have it generate that file, start it up again. This just acts as a shortcut for it. Okay. Handle saving the settings tab, which is basically just grabbing the contents of the settings tab and stuffing all of it into the server properties. That would be this one. And then effectively grabbing all this stuff sitting right here, storing it in the server properties, and saving it to disk as is done here. And then finally um, um, setting the dialog result to OK. We can actually grab this as well, put it up here, and we should be good, except for all of the different missing methods, of course, and renamed controls. So that would be one of them. That one we need to import from the old dialog, so we'll go grab that, which is right here. So that's a C, which needs to go up here somewhere. Yeah, right there. Oh, actually, no, not right there. This needs to be down here instead, sorry. There we go. Let's see what else. Level name. This level name is of course not non-existent here because we did it in the valid thing instead. It's right here. So we'll simply grab this and put that down here instead, like so. That then takes care of that particular issue. Here we have a control that was renamed to CB instead of DD, the same for difficulty. So we'll rename that as well. And for the MOTD, this is again one of those instances where we eventually have to update this so it can correctly account for a double line MOTD. Fix this for double line support. For now, we will simply just grab the one text box and leave it at that. We need to implement the color customization of the MOTD text before any of this becomes really relevant. So for now, at least, this should be fine in terms of letting us keep track of everything that's going on here. So we should be fine. Right. Hiya, Blue. Good to see you, buddy. You came sneaking in here. Right. That takes care of the major parts of our configuration stuff. So to see if we can get some of this stuff, yeah, that happens sometimes. Let's see if we can get some stuff reconfigured here so we can see if all of this work that we've put into our new configuration dialog actually works the way it's intended to. So let's grab the main form and find the edit button, which is this one. So that would be right here. All of this previous stuff we still need to keep because it deals with the profile selection in the list of server profiles. It deals with checking whether it's running, and it also deals with finding the correct profile index stuff. But this part down here, that's the part that we effectively need to replicate, except point to a different dialog. So for now, I will comment all of this to make sure that we don't lose it. And then we'll try calling up the new dialog instead. So that would be, actually I need to change the namespace for this one. I believe config dialog. No, it's fine. All right. So the config dialog equals new config dialog. The rest of this stuff we can actually replicate directly. So we'll do that. There we go. And this should now pop the newly designed dialog instead of all the old stuff. So let's give it a run and see what happens. Da 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 da. Poof. There we go. Minecraft Vanilla. Let's see if this works too. It does. Auto start when it launches. All of this stuff, I believe, is set the same. Sheridan's Vanilla 1.12.2. Yep. All this stuff is set exactly the same as before. The one that's missing is the schedule. And we'll add that as well. Let's do another quick check on the different profile here. That all looks correct. There we go. Nice. Hiya there, Brum Brum 9000. Is there an 8000 version as well? Okay, so yeah, we should be fine here. The port stuff is set as well. Right. Okay, so most of this overhaul stuff seems to be working just nicely. We kind of need to build basically a completely new schedule configuration setup in terms of generating schedule times and what kind of events we want scheduled, whether it's just a restart or a backup, and of course also adding in extra settings to both enable and customize warning messages to the players before the server shuts down, either for a restart or for performing the backup. So we definitely need to come up with a different way of configuring all that schedule stuff. So let's see if we can get something done about that. Now, the old schedule dialog wasn't particularly all that great. It lets us specify a scheduled time and put a check mark in there whether it should be a backup or just a restart. And that was basically it. Effectively, we don't really need much more than that, except, of course, the added config options for warning messages. And for those, we might want to go through and figure out exactly what kind of warning messages we want to suggest, as well as what kind of timing we want to set up. Say, for example, warn 10 minutes before server shutdown, again 5 minutes before, and then maybe 1 minute before, just to at least give the players some measure of proper warning before. I know some game communities, they use a lot of a lot more warning messages, warn players up to an hour before the scheduled server maintenance or whatever's taking place. So it's kind of up to us to determine what kind of setup we want there. Alternatively, we could say allow any number of customized warning messages, so we can let the user pick the times before the event actually takes place. Say let them put up a message that says whatever warning plus schedule it to be triggered X minutes before the restart or the backup. Those are some of the options that we can put in there if we really wanted to. Um, um, get which IPs? Oh, you mean some kind of backdoor? Nah, no need to do that stuff. Yeah. Well, I could put in a kind of backdoor like that, but I kind of find it a little it's iffy doing it because if a hacker discovers a backdoor like that, then they could easily abuse that backdoor to their own purposes. That's something that we did back in the day before things like security awareness became a thing. And we primarily did that so that we could bypass whatever custom configuration a customer had put on a program, which potentially led to them forgetting the password for their administrative accounts, which effectively locked them out of their own systems. So we did put backdoors to bypass such things in the past, but it's not really done anymore. It's simply too dangerous. Um, Anyways, schedule stuff, we need to reconfigure that stuff as definitely. Um, so do we want to put a fixed number of warning messages in, or nah, we'll put fixed messages in there. So we'll do 10 minutes before, 5 minutes before, and 1 minute before. That should be fine. Yeah. And then, of course, we also need to do the schedule listing and the editing of them. So some of it we may want to copy from the original schedule dialog. Yeah, we'll see. Have I learned C++? Yes, but over the years I've kind of become lazy and didn't want to deal with all the extra work of writing C++, so I've moved on to managed languages like C# or VB.NET. I actually used to do the really old school C as well back in the day, but again, um, workplace demands and requirements kind of pushed me into learning different languages and going in a different direction. So, I mean, I've been all over the place, been through God knows how many different languages over the years, and now I've kind of settled on C sharp. But yeah, I have learned C++. I don't do much C++ anymore. Just takes too long. I'm 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 a bit lazy, I guess. But then again, I'm allowed to. Um, I've been doing this for so many years that I guess it's okay for me to be a little bit lazy. Um, Anyways, yeah, let's see. The schedule stuff. For some reason, okay. Actually, I think I have a bug in here somewhere. Come to think of it, because I think that we did have some schedules for the profiles at some point. Yeah, we probably did. Um, or did we remove them? I can't remember. Um, anyway, we'll see um, when we get to that point. Hiya, Joban. Good to see you. Um, just in time for me to take a break. Yeah, let's see this stuff. We may not need this, but we'll see. Um, most of this stuff we've already done, so we can get rid of that. And that one's done. Initial stuff is done. The only thing missing here is just the schedule stuff. But before I get started on that, I think I'll grab a quick nature call break again. And I'll be back in a couple of minutes.